Hey guys, my name is Tim. I'm the master mechanic at Zeiten BMW Mobile Services, and in this video we have 2007 BMW 335i with N54 engine, and we're gonna do the valve cover gasket replacement. This is the one of the most common oil leaks on this engine, as on any other engine with the BMW. So let's get to it. First of all, we're gonna start with freeing the wire harness. It's just put your screwdriver right here and push it out. Then you'll be able to move it out of the way, and there is other three tabs right here. Just free here, in the middle, and in the back. That will allow us to free the harness later on when we pull it up. The next thing, you can disconnect this wire right here. Take it out of the way and take this cover off. There's one tab here and the other one from the other side. Also, there is a water hose here for the windshield wipers and the rubber piece right here. Then there is another holding rubber piece right there, so just slide it out. And the next thing right here is this 8mm bolt. There you go. Also, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bolts for the cabin filter housing. We'll remove those. Now we can move this housing out of the way. And there's the same two tabs right here for this cover. So just take it out, and the same rubber piece that holds it in place, as well as right there. And also the same 8mm bolt right there that holding this whole thing together. Also, don't forget to remove all the wires attached to it, and this is it. Now we can move it out of the way. Just lift it up, free the wiring harness, and take it off. Next thing we're gonna do is to remove this engine cover. It's originally four 5mm Allen bolts, 1, 2, 3, and the other one is right there on the bottom. As usual, it's missing. So we're just gonna remove 3 of them. And take this cover out of the way. Next thing we're gonna do, now we're exposed to all the ignition coils and we need to remove all of them. So basically what you do it like that. If the ignition coil gets stuck sometimes when you release it but nothing moves, you can put your screwdriver right there, twist it a little bit, here, there, and then it will allow to freely move. And when you remove the ignition coil, just lift it straight up. I usually use a screwdriver like that and just lift it. There you go. Next thing will be this bar right here. So you just do this, take this out, and you can use 14mm socket for this center bolt. It might be really tough, so let me see. Yes, it is very tough. You don't need to remove it all the way, just loosen it and it will stay right there. The other bolt is right here. You can use 11mm socket. Those both bolts are designed for the E socket. I think this one E14, that one over there is E16, but if you don't have it, you can use 11mm. I have those, but it's just those work fine, completely perfect, and the bolt is not damaged, nothing's happening, it's all good. And then we can remove this bar. Just lift it and slide it out. You see it's open end here, so this is how it's done. Next thing, I'm gonna open this box right there. This is where the DME computer is and a bunch of other stuff. So we just lift those tabs right here on each side, then move those guys to the open position on each side. There's also tabs right here. It's a little bit hard to reach, but it's doable. And now we're ready to open it up. This will allow us to move the wires out of its places right here and out of the way from the valve cover. This one as well, and this one. The next thing we're gonna do is remove those positive wires. It's 10mm and 13mm nuts right here. Let's do those. Now they're out, I'll put the cover back on so we don't accidentally touch it, because there are some bolts in there I'm gonna remove. And now we can remove the rest of the wiring out of its place, kind of. Put those in here. Okay, and the next thing we're gonna do is remove those 8mm nuts here, there, and over there. It's 3 of those, and the fuel injector connectors, and then free this wiring. It's a E10 bolt right there, 2 of them. To remove the fuel injector connector, you just need to put a little bit of tension here and then lift it up. Simple. Next thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna remove this PCV hose, and the PCV valve is built into it. This is kind of tricky hose right there, so I'll start with the pick tool. I will be pushing it outwards. Start with the bottom, moves to the bottom, then this. Little by little I'm gonna free it completely. Best if you have something to stick in there. If you don't, just be patient with it. There you go, and the same goes to the other side. It's a little bit, it might be a little bit more tricky because there is not much room in there, but it's basically the same thing. That's it. Let's put it away. Next thing we're gonna do is move the wires out of the way right there in the back. This is it, and this is free now. Now we're gonna remove the air filter box and this air duct right there. It's Torx 20 bolts right here, one on one side and one on the other side. After that, it's just those connectors right here, one and the other. And the air duct is out of the way. This is the push connector hose, so just push it on both sides and lift it. Free it from here. Next thing is those clamps right there. It's one here, it comes to the air filter box. So make it completely loose. That's good enough. And one is on the other side, is right here. That's good enough. And the next thing I would say we would do is to free the wires from its tabs right here by just simply lifting it up, but they're already out of the place. Nothing else holds this air filter box, so it's on this rubber thingies in there. All you need to do is just lift it. There you go. And that's it, air filter box out. After that, I'm gonna remove all the wiring, just free it all up. Those are oxygen sensors. Disconnect this right there. Remove this one out of the way also. Just basically make everything free. Just like that, and then I'm gonna take those guys out of its place. Twist, remove. Same here. Basically what you gotta do, twist and remove. So everything free here. Also disconnect this fuel rail. It's just a simple push and slide. Next thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna remove the fuel rail completely with the connection to the fuel injector. So we're gonna loosen this 17mm nut right here first, then 6 14mm on each injector. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And there is also 4 11mm bolts holding this fuel rail in place. It's one here, one there under this guy. So what we want to do is push this thing down just like that and take it out. There you go. And this piece right there, I don't know if you can see it, that's what holds it in place right there. That's why you need to push it down a little bit. And the last one is the same. There you go. So it exposes us to those 11mm bolts. 1, 2, and 3 and 4. And that will allow us to move the fuel rail completely out of the way. There you go. With the fuel rail out of the way, next thing would be freeing those vacuum lines. So they just slide up. We'll need it to remove the fuel rail just in order to get those guys out. And to further free them up, we'll need to remove those vacuum reservoirs held by two 10mm nuts in the bottom right there and one 10mm bolt right here. So we'll start with the bottom ones. I'm gonna use the magnet to pick them up. It's the best way to do it. Now, the very important thing, be very careful when you remove the lines from this little nipples. The best thing to do, in my opinion, try to twist it right on top, just like that. When it twists, it means it's loose. And now it's simpler for you to remove. Let's see on this one. Those can get really brittle, and when you remove them forcefully, they can break this little piece right there. So be really careful with those. Now we have those out. The same thing goes for the bottom ones. I'm gonna use the same rule. Try to twist it first. Yep, it moves a little. It means it's loose. And when you push it out, just make sure it's completely straight. No angles are allowed in there. otherwise you can break it. It's not a very expensive piece, but you really don't want to break anything when you do the job because it slows everything down. Don't rush it, take your time with it. There we go. Okay, so almost everything is out of the way. Now we can freely move those lines aside. Just put them somewhere. And I'm gonna remove those two 10 millimeters that hold expansion tank in place, so we can easily move it around just like that. Also, there is two electrical connectors for the boost control solenoids. Take those out. Those are out. And now we are finally able to move this wiring kind of out of the way. I'll also release those vacuum lines from here, just like that. Other trick, this wiring harness has a little pin right there. I don't know if you can see it, but you can free it from there as well. It will give it a little bit more room to maneuver. And you can put it right there. This is out of the valve cover. You can see. All clear here. These are oxygen sensors. And that's basically it. That's we cleared everything that stays on the way of the removal of the valve cover. Now we're gonna loosen all the bolts. The hard ones would be, well, of course, ones in the back, but at least here you can definitely see them. And I'm gonna use the same 10mm socket as I use for N52 engine, but the 10mm bolts out there are way shorter. So this socket, it goes all over it, and when you put the extension to it, it doesn't click, it's barely there. So, but usually those bolts are not tight at all. So if you just put your socket in there, press it down, and there you go. That's how you remove it. There is 3 bolts like that, 1, 2, and 1 in the back. Number 3 right here, right there. They all remove the same way. And after that, we have lots of bolts around the perimeter, but don't forget about the ones in the middle. The middle bolts right there. This one over here. Just go through everything. And I'm also gonna loosen a little bit this fuel injector bracket, the bolt that holds the bracket in place, just a little bit, just tiny bit, so it can free a little bit the injector so they can be moved just a tiny bit. so all the bolts are loose. Just double check. The back ones are a little bit harder, but with these two extensions, I think it's 12-inch and I don't know, 4-inch, something like that. Easy to reach. It's right there in the back. So the bottom bolt is right there. You'll have to feel it and then loosen it. Then one bolt is right here in this gap, one right there, and one on top. This is a 4 back bolts. Those are the hardest ones. And after you remove those and everything else, now we're ready to remove the valve cover out of the way. Almost forgot. Let's remove this weather stripe. Clean it out. That's the way to go. Now let's move the expansion tank a little bit out of the way. Gasket is sticking in there. For this engine, so we're basically out of the woods with the gasket, and all we need to do is remove the gasket from the valve cover, because that's the last piece that's holding it in there. The valve cover gasket, the valve cover grooves are completely clean for the gasket installment. Now what we're gonna do is put some silicone in there, but we need just a tiny bits. I'll show you exactly where I put them and how much. So this is it, this is the bottom. Right there. You just need tiny drops of silicone, and this is not to seal anything. This is just to keep the gasket in place for reinstallment purposes. That's all. Can put a little bit more in the back because it's the most difficult spot, and it's hard to control. Can put a little less on top of the valve cover. And the middle is pretty simple as well. You can see pretty much everything in there. That's it. That's the whole silicone you'll need. For this job, I usually use L-ring gasket. The reason why, because not on this engine, but on naturally aspirated 3-liter N54 and 52, I had bad experience with Victor Ryan's gasket only on this engine, but I just switched to L-ring and never had a problem with it. So I'm gonna stick to L-ring. I recommend that for you too. When installing the gasket, make sure it sits in a groove properly all the way, and after you're done, definitely go through all the perimeter with your fingers just to make sure it sits properly. Now I'm gonna let it sit for about 30 minutes so the silicone can cure a little bit and the gasket will stick to the valve cover, and after that we're just gonna install it back. While we're waiting for the valve cover gasket stick to the valve cover, we definitely want to clean all the surfaces where the gasket goes, clean it thoroughly. And the bottom is the hardest because there might be oil coming out. But do the best you can. Also clean all the surfaces around it so they stay clean, and if the valve cover gasket leaks again, you will see it on the surface near the valve cover. That's for sure something you need to do. Okay guys, we're ready to put the valve cover back on. Just lift it like that, flip it, check the gasket seats properly, and the way to do it, we'll lift all the wiring, everything out of the way. Put it there, just for a tiny second. Then make sure all the wires are out of the way once again, and put it back in place. Nice and easy. Nothing is on the way. If you're not sure if you still have your gasket in there, just lift every corner like that and check for the gasket with your hand. You can always feel it if it's in the right place or not. So if you're not sure, better double check. That's all. The gasket, the valve cover is in place. Now what I'm gonna do is I'll start with the center bolts with the 10mm ones, and then all those E10s, the center. Then I'll start from the back, everything hand tight first, and then the back ones I'll start tightening it, the rear back, front. I'll crisscross those rear bolts, and then I'll go from bottom to top, crisscross pattern to tighten them to spec. all the bolts are tight, everything's good. So the valve cover gasket replacement technically completed. Now we're gonna put everything back together, and I'll start with the wiring harness. We just need to route it properly everywhere. Now we have those vacuum lines, don't forget about those. We will need to put them back right here. So those are just sliding in there, just like that. And after that, they're going in here under this wiring harness, and that's the way they sit. So this is done. Now we can install back the vacuum reservoirs. Now we can put this reservoirs back. So the longer one goes to the furthest one. Be careful, not break it. And the shorter one goes right here to the closest one. To install those 10mm nuts, I'm going to use the magnet. That's the easiest way to do it. Just snap it onto the thread, spin a little, and move the magnet out of the way. Just like that. There goes one. And I think the other one is just by hand. So this part is complete. Now I'm gonna route the wires back in place the way they're supposed to be. First we'll go are the oxygen sensor wires. There's two brackets where you put them on the bottom. Then there is a kind of bracket in the back of the valve cover. And that's it. Now we can put this back in place. This one as well. And this one. I'll put those in place for now. Back there. Now all of this is ready to install the fuel rail back. First put this 17mm on, then every injector hand tight. Okay, and now we're ready to install back the 11mm bolts that hold the fuel rail in place. Once again, this one is 17mm. Let's make it tight. And at the fuel injectors, those are 14mm. Now the fuel rail back in place, we can put those guys back the way they're supposed to be and route the wires through them. So this one goes first. Oxygen sensors. Also, don't forget to connect the fuel rail. And the oxygen sensor connectors just snap in there. Okay, don't forget to connect those are soil pressure sensor and coolant temperature sensor. Next thing we're gonna do is put the bolts for the wiring harness back in place. Those are E10s. Those bolts are aluminum and real easy to break, so be careful with those. And now we're gonna be just putting all the wiring back together. So connecting the injectors, putting those 8mm back in place, basically cannot mess it up. All the wires have been there for years, so they kind of pointing where they're supposed to be. If it doesn't feel right, it's probably not right. Okay, now 8mm nuts. That's done. Now let's put back those 10mm and 13mm for the positive wires. Done. And now we can put this cover right back on. Just make sure it seats properly and it locks good. The rubber back in place, weather strip, now don't forget about those guys. At any moment after the valve cover is installed, you can install those. It doesn't really make a difference, but important thing, just don't forget about them. And now we're ready to install the coils back. The proper way to do it, so you flip this cap all the way, put this in the spark plug tube, take the connector, get it right there, and then slide it. And it locks on its own. All you need to do is just click it and push it down in its position. The same goes to the other one. All the coils are interchangeable, so you don't need to worry which one was where. You don't need to number it like I've seen a lot. Some people just number the coils for some reason. Well, it might be part of the diagnostic, but still, don't see the reason for that. Okay, the coils are back in place. And next thing we're gonna do is install this PCV valve and those. Well, this installation is way simpler than taking it apart, so just click it. That's it. So now we're ready to put all the plastic back in its place. I'll start with the engine cover. everything aligns perfectly fine. Also, don't forget to tighten this bar. It's 14 millimeter. This one is 11. Now we can put the cap back. Just turn it clockwise. Now we can do this piece right there. The way to do it is you align those marks just in the middle, just angle it like that. There is little tabs in there on this big plastic piece that go under the weather strip. So we lock the wire harness in here, the big one. So you push it as much as you can, and then you lift this side, slides in, and this one slides in. Now it's all in place. The last piece, you just slide this thing back in here. Make sure that your wires are all good. You can connect this one right now. Put this rubber piece in place. Now it's 8 millimeter bolt that holds it on this side. So we're gonna install this first. And do the same on the other side. Put the wire back where it belongs. And this rubber piece right there. Okay, all good. Now we can do the cabin filter housing. Now the last pieces, we'll put this plastic cover back in place. So the rubber goes first, then route the water hose for windshield wipers. That's one side. And that's the other. So this is it, guys. Everything back in place. The car ran for a bit. Valve cover gasket is completely replaced. Just the pointers. If you see smoke coming out of here when you start the car after a couple minutes, it doesn't mean that your valve cover gasket is leaking. It's just when you lift the valve cover, excessive oil comes out, goes directly to the exhaust manifold, and it starts smoking. The best thing to check is the surface around the valve cover, to see if there is a fresh oil in there or something like that. So I hope this video was helpful. If you have any questions, please ask below, and thank you guys for watching. See you next time.